In this module, we're going to learn about the cannabinoids found in the plant, so-called phytocannabinoids. The most prevalent phytocannabinoid is tetrahydrocannabinol, better known and well known as THC. It constitutes about 12 to 20% of the dried content in some strains, and even up to 25 or 30% in more potent varieties. It's the compound that creates the high associated with recreational use. It binds to what are known as CB1 and CB2 receptors, which we're going to learn about in a later module. It is a partial agonist of those receptors. It behaves in a similar way to the body's own endocannabinoids, and anandamide and 2-AG, all of which again we're going to cover in the endocannabinoid system module. Yet it's worth remembering that it also interacts with other neurotransmitter systems, including, for example, the opioid system and the 5-HT1A receptors. Its effect on the body, therefore, is not purely through the endocannabinoid system. THC in its own right has many medicinal properties. In particular, we know it has analgesic properties. It's anti-inflammatory. It's a muscle relaxant. It has anti-nausea effects, and it's antioxidant. The second most common cannabinoid in the plant, in the most prevalent non-psychoactive one, is cannabidiol, CBD. It does bind to the endocannabinoid system, but its mode of action is largely through activating or interacting with other neurotransmitter systems, such as the adenosine system, serotonin system, and the vanilloid receptors. CBD has well-known medicinal properties, including being anti-anxiety and anticonvulsant. As an example, it's the only constituent of GW Pharma's Epidiolex, which is 99.9% pure CBD and recently licensed in the United States to treat childhood drug-resistant epilepsies. CBD also is known to have some anti-cancer effects, at least in animal models. It has neuroprotective qualities and is analgesic, but it has a particularly useful characteristic, and it tends to counteract the psychoactivity of THC. This makes the non-psychoactive medicines containing both THC and CBD viable. The psychoactive effect of a relatively small amount of THC can largely be cancelled out with a relatively large amount of CBD. Before advice is given to patients, it's important to know the THC-CBD ratio so that you can make a reasonable guess about the properties of that particular variety. Most manufacturers will produce several CBD-THC varieties. In Canada, for example, most of the producers there have at least 5 different varieties. One high in CBD and low in THC. One at the other end of the spectrum, high in THC, low in CBD. And more balanced varieties in between with broadly similar proportions of THC and CBD. Each of those has their own particular medicinal value. And it comes back to the fact that cannabis medicine is a very personalised medicine. There's not one product for one condition. Alongside THC and CBD, there are well over 100 other cannabinoids. These are so-called minor cannabinoids, but they may not be minor at all, as they may all have, as far as we know, medicinal properties. But we know relatively little about not many of them, but some of them. In the natural plant, the cannabinoids are in their acidic form. And for medicine generally, they have to go through a chemical process called decarboxylation, which translates that acidic form to a non-acidic form. Hence the non-acidic cannabinoids, mainly, but not entirely, are used for their medicinal properties. So let's now have a look at the cannabinoid pathway. The precursor of most of the cannabinoids is CBG, cannabigerol. That, of course, remember, comes in the acidic form in the natural plant. It's then metabolized to the other acidic forms of THC, CBD, and cannabichromene, CBC. In animal models, CBG itself is known to have at least anti-cancer effects, anti-inflammatory effects, antibacterial qualities. It's an appetite stimulant. It has positive effects on the bladder function, and it has a role in glaucoma management. CBG is then broken down, as we've said, into CBC, cannabichromene, as well as CBD and THC. CBC has medicinal properties such as anti-inflammatory, it's anticonvulsant, it's anti-cancer effects, and it's not psychoactive until it has undergone that decarboxylation process, essentially by adding heat or by aging. CBDA, the acidic form of CBD, also has medical properties. This one is anti-nausea, anti-inflammatory, and again some anti-cancer effects. And that's the one that's decarboxylated, of course, to become CBD. You have to remember that there's a parallel pathway called the varine pathway. That's the same as the one we looked at, but it has an N-propyl ring. And so the compounds we've mentioned are called, for example, CBG-V and its precursor CBG-VA. And CBG-VA is then broken down into CBD-VA, THC-VA, and CBC-VA. All of them need to be decarboxylated to the varying varieties of CBD, THC, and CBC. One particularly interesting one is tetrahydrocannabivarine, THCV, and that's known to have a positive effect on bone growth. It alleviates anxiety and, interestingly, may have anti-Alzheimer's disease properties, but also it's known as a strong appetite suppressant and could have a very interesting role to play in obesity management in the future. CBDV, the varying variety of CBD, has properties including being anticonvulsant. It has an effect on Crohn's disease and maybe other inflammatory bowel diseases. CBCV, the varying variety of CBC, has properties including being analgesic, anti-inflammatory, and maybe, interestingly, have an effect on depression. The last one I want to mention is CBN, cannabinol. This is the breakdown product of THC. THC breaks down into CBN over time. But CBN has interesting properties. It's known to aid sleep, particularly, stimulate appetite, promote bone growth after a fracture, for example, and has other analgesic, anti-inflammatory, antibacterial, and anticonvulsive properties. So we can see, although we don't know that much about many of the cannabinoids, those we do know about have really interesting medicinal properties. And we're going to know more about those in the coming years. And I have no doubt that cannabis medicine is going to be a very exciting topic in the future. And we're going to find out a lot of interesting medicines in the coming decades.